is told of seeing a forest of giant redwoods for the very first time. There were some small children nearby, he writes, giggling and chattering and pushing each other around. But nobody had to tell them to quiet down as we entered. They quieted down all by themselves. Everybody did. You couldn't hear a sound of any kind. It was like coming into a vast, empty room. 200 or 300 feet high the redwoods stood, and you had to crane your neck back as far as it would go to see the leaves at the top. They made their own twilight out of the bright California day. There was a stillness and stateliness about them that seemed to be part of you as you stood there stunned by the sight of them. They had been growing in that place for going on 2,000 years. And with infinite care, they were growing even now. You could feel them doing it. They made you realize that all your life you had been mistaken. Oaks and ashes, maples and chestnuts and elms you had seen for as long as you could remember. But never until this moment had you so much as dreamed what a tree really was. And what the author describes, of course, is an experience of sheer awe and wonder, breathtaking awe in the presence of those magnificent trees. He had no idea what a tree really was until he saw those trees, and it left him awestruck and silent. And that's a good way to understand the reaction of the people in our gospel reading for today. They were absolutely awestruck. They thought they knew what a God was, but never until that moment had they so much as dreamed of what God really was. And perhaps we would have been awestruck ourselves. Demon possession, exorcism, pigs throwing themselves off of a cliff. Awesome. And yet, I wonder, because there seems to be so little in our lives today that is capable of filling us with awe. Either we quickly explain everything away, or have the attitude, been there, done that, seen that. Every now and then on the morning news, there's a brief clip showing the latest rocket blasting off into space, carrying astronauts on a mission, or taking billionaires for a joyride. But my reaction is to glance at it, turn away, and yawn. Not too many years ago, however, millions of people watched with mouths hanging open with awe as a gigantic rocket with a space shuttle strapped on its back slowly rose into the sky. Most of us gasped and grew silent at the sight of it. Now, we yawn, ho-hum, and it can be true in our relationships as well. After a while, we simply expect someone to love us or to care for us. Take it for granted that someone does. But if we really think about it, think about the way we truly are, all our idiosyncrasies and peculiarities, our foibles and flaws and frailties, the way we often behave, we could come to no other conclusion that no one in their right mind could ever love us. And yet, we are loved. We are loved. And yet, ho-hum. And God, the people in the story were awestruck at the power of God in Jesus, seeing what God, Jesus, truly was. And you and I, do we ever feel any awe at the thought of God, the thought of God's love, the thought of the mystery and power of God? Or do we feel little or no awe, but see God as simply a good buddy whom we expect to love us, expect to heal us, expect to take care of us, bless us. Because after all, that's God's job, isn't it? And so, is there anything that fills us with awe anymore? Anything? Of course, by this point, you might be asking, what's the big deal? Why is this awesomeness so important? Because from awe comes ecstasy, a sense of being lifted out of ourselves, to see the way God and life truly are. You know, now and then, especially when the temperature begins to hover around 100 degrees, I page through a book that uses images of winter to speak of God and life. Because I guess I want to be reminded that cooler days are possible, and I still love snow. Now, at one point, the author speaks of awe and says this: awe rises in those who ponder the wonders of winter, in the face of a frozen waterfall or icily arrested billows. We gasp. Spontaneously, we sputter to describe the glistening of ice in the dawn sun, or in awe that feels like true fear. We wonder at the power of storms in places of warm winters. And along with awe comes ecstasy. We enjoy. We do not explain anything, as awe and ecstasy combine. And the truth is that in the presence of wondrous beauty, or the fearsome power of nature, in the presence of overwhelming love, we are lifted out of ourselves somehow, carried beyond the confines of day-to-day experience, and see something like we've never seen it before. We can't explain, don't want to explain, only enjoy and rejoice. Something within us comes alive, and we are lifted in hope. And the most natural response is to want to give ourselves over to it. The man in the story who was healed wanted to follow Jesus. Such was his awe and ecstasy in the presence of God's power and love, that the most natural thing to do was to give himself to God in return. From awe come joy, faith, hope. Of course, the other people in the story had a different reaction. They wanted Jesus to leave, to get out of town. Along with awe, they felt great fear. And that can be the truth of it as well. To experience profound love, to experience something of God, to feel something of the power of God, is to feel both awe and fear. Because it can upset our neat little worlds, turn us upside down, carry us beyond what is known and certain. If you've ever been truly loved, or if you've been in the presence of great beauty, if you've known something of the healing and strengthening power of God, then you know such things can cause us to lose control, rethink our lives, disturb the safe boundaries of our day-to-day lives. And could it be, though, that we actually prefer ho-hum lives because they are safe and predictable? Could it be that the purpose of our been there, done that attitude is to close ourselves off from what is surprising or unsettling or disturbing? Could it be that we're afraid of losing control, giving ourselves fully to something, running the risk of loving and opening ourselves to God and life as they truly are and can be, and thus prefer fear to ecstasy or hope? Then again, maybe we've had enough of fear. We live in a world in which fear seems to be the primary emotion most of us feel. And the only thing that produces awe in us is cruelty or evil or violence. That, these days, is what leaves us gasping. And I have a feeling most of us are tired of it. We yearn for something that can lift us in hope, give us a courage in the face of a world like ours, bring us alive, and move us to keep loving. the very awesomeness of God. And yet how? How do we come to experience such awe? Well, maybe a trip to California would be a good place to start, or go to Minnesota in the winter. Then again, you just might want to stand outside on a warm Georgia evening and watch clouds billow up 20, 30, 40,000 feet and more. But we really don't need to fly off to far places or study the skies. Our everyday lives will do. And the place to start here is with what God has done in our lives. There is enough awe with that for anyone. If we would think through our lives honestly and well, what we would see, I think, are moments of healing and hope, moments of courage and prayer, times when a strength beyond our strength came, times of forgiveness and peace. In each of our lives, the love and power of God has been there and is at work, if only we had the eyes to see it. Or just start with the fact that another human being actually loves you. You? If that doesn't leave you gasping and stunned, I don't know what will. In our everyday lives, there is much of God that can fill us with awe and lift us in hope, even in a world like ours. For most of our lives, we think we know what a tree really is, what God really is. But perhaps like children walking into a redwood forest, we need to enter our lives each day and look with all of our heart and mind until at last we grow silent and our mouths hang open with awe and we are filled with an ecstasy. And in our joy, gladly give ourselves to God and to one another. Amen. Amen.